Hi, welcome back to the Adster Podcast, episode 2. I have with me today Ketan Chandak, who's our CTO, my co-founder, and pleasure to have you on this podcast, Ketan.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure is all mine. Yeah.
So Ketan, we've been at it for about 2 years, and we started this podcast recently. I was talking to Rajiv on the first episode, and we spoke about some of the things that we are building. But it's great to have you here to dive a little deeper into the technology elements of what we are building out as an ad tech stack. But let's get to your background first, right? I mean, for the audience and everybody else who's listening in, I think it would be great to know your journey to Adster. Of course, Twitter and Truecaller, where you and Rajiv built some stuff together. But would love to hear it in your own words and what you've built out as a platform in the past and how that experience is really helping you with what you're building today here at Adster.
Sure. So it all started back in around 2018. So Truecaller was my first stint, and it started with an internship. So I graduated from BITS in 2018. And as part of the last semester, you have to do like a 6 months internship. And Truecaller was my 6 months internship. And that is how I started working for Truecaller, and then they gave me a PPO, and then I started working there for full time. And I worked there for a few years in the data science and the machine learning team. And in about 2019 actually, so that's when Rajiv came into the company, and that's when Truecaller became big enough to have essentially business units instead of horizontal teams, which it had earlier before Rajiv joined. So Rajiv joined as the head of the ads team there, the product director, and I was part of the engineering team of the ad side. So for a few years, then essentially for the next few years, we both worked very closely together on optimizing the ad stack that Truecaller had. And at that time, we had already hit at least 100 million users scale, and it was already one of the top 5 publishers in India. So we knew whatever we were building would hit a few 100 million lives, and we had to be very conscious about everything, cost. So we did a bunch of optimizations on the client and the backend side, built a lot of products around real-time intelligence, understanding user intent, user profile stores from the ground up. And that's where essentially we were able to boost Truecaller's revenues 4x, 5x in the next 2 years, keeping aside organic growth. And now Truecaller is a public company, and everyone can see the results there. After that, after COVID, so Rajiv had moved on from Truecaller, and a few months later, I had moved to Singapore for Twitter. And in Twitter also, I was part of the data team. So it was not on the ad side, but it was still a team which used to handle a lot of client events, user-facing data. So I was part of the core home timeline and the search teams which powered Twitter. And it was a similar experience, but different in the sense that it was 100x scale. The company obviously was probably, again, 10x bigger. Every process was different there. I understood how do you manage large systems at scale and then still ensure that you don't miss out on key insights, core insights. How do you work on petabyte scale data? So up until now, previous, I was only working on terabyte scale data, but this was another level, petabyte scale data coming in every day. So all of these learnings essentially condensed into a thought that what I've learned, what Rajiv and me had built at Truecaller, we started talking about it. So we thought that why not build something, because this is something which a lot of people would anyway need. So then we started talking, and then we thought about how to build the first version of the product. So on weekends and on evenings, we started writing product documents, we started working on things, and then that's how Adster came into place. So yeah, this is the story.
So, it amazes me how, you're the youngest member of our founding team, and I forget at times how young you are, but then, to have gotten the kind of experience that you did with Twitter and with Truecaller at the scale that you did, I'm sure it must have been a very steep learning curve for you as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as an engineering leader in these organizations and having to build things from scratch, maybe do a lot of experimentation and iteration, it might have been very challenging at times, right? And I'm sure these are the similar kind of challenges that any engineering team within, say, an ad tech company also faces. So for the audience, can you just lay out what was your journey like then? And, so what helped you in a way surmount some of those challenges that you encountered? You mentioned cost being one, building for scale being another. So how did you typically, juggle these, various challenges and then still manage to build out in the past?
Right. So actually, I'd better answer this question with essentially what we currently do and what learnings I've picked up from my previous stint.
Sure.
And put it inside the key decision making that we do here at Adster.
Sure.
So at Adster, we currently process 1 billion requests across all our endpoints. It's a very high scale, low latency, real time system. We process a lot of logs so to understand exactly what the users want so that we can do relevant and contextual advertising. And obviously with this scale, and we are still, I would say, a very lean and small company. With this scale, you need to ensure that your systems are up all the time, the costs are kept to a minimal, etc. So, for example, most startups, what they do is they use, for most of the technology stack that they do, like the database or a message queue or something, they usually would use an off-the-shelf solution. So what we have done is we essentially, whenever we think of deploying something new, we decide whether an off-the-shelf is better for us versus us deploying and managing it ourselves. And we look at all the trade-offs, maintenance, overhead. So there is CapEx, OpEx, everything that comes in. And then we consciously decide what to do. For example, our databases are self-hosted, our observability and monitoring stack around Prometheus and Grafana, which is obviously very key and essential at this scale, is self-hosted. But obviously, our message queues, our analytics engine are all Google. Since we are on GCP, it's all Google stack. So we keep that decision very conscious, and that's what I learned in previous stints also. You can imagine at Twitter scale, it might, in hindsight, it always makes sense to do everything yourself, because at that scale, you can have your own data center, you can do everything. But even at Twitter, we used to do most of our things on Google Cloud. And I've been through documents which explain why A versus B is better, what is better to build in-house versus what is better to do off the shelf. That is a key learning that I took from there, and I implemented it here so that our OpEx, CapEx is kept to a minimum. So yeah, that is one. The other thing is essentially being able to undo some infra optimizations on the system, which otherwise I wouldn't have learned if I had not worked at. So if companies don't have scale, they usually don't look at those level of infra optimizations. For example, our SDK from all across our clients does a lot of client-side crunching and sends billions of logs to our servers per day. And for that, we have ensured that we use the most efficient serialization, deserialization technique so that the cost, ingress, egress cost on our servers is at the minimum. So this might sound like, okay, this is just a small change, but for us, using A versus B is a few $1,000s a month at least. So right. That is there. We ensure that all our server to server side, essentially communication is via a virtual private network that we have built, so that it does not go out of a data center and then comes back in via another route. It's all inside, so it's super efficient. And since we process billions of logs every day, billions of API requests every day, this happens again a few billion times every day. So all of this optimizations, so usually companies which are at our stage and this usually don't focus a lot on this, but I've been very particular about this because I know that the scale at which you're operating is all of this is very crucial. And this is what I've learned from my previous stints. So yeah.
Got it. I mean, that's fascinating because I think, like you rightly said, every engineering leader kind of goes through that crucial phase during that initial thing, like let's just build it and then figure out for scale later.
Yeah.
But unless you bake in some of these good practices right at the beginning and think about the scale that you're going to get to, you might just, have a problem which is unsurmountable or, needs a total redesign at a later stage.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's great that you're sort of focusing on that aspect, considering, even every single publisher that we bring on board today as a partner onto our ad stack, then tends to, obviously balloon the kind of number of requests that are hitting our servers and our backend infrastructure. So In the last episode, we spoke about some of the stuff that we were, creating overall. We talked about the ads in a box concept, which, we go out and talk about for publishers to use one single simple integration, but they are really unlocking a lot of things on the back end. A lot of those things on the back end today are being built by you and your team in terms of like the ad server, or for that matter, the yield optimizer, which, are extremely crucial pieces considering the scale and the volume that we handle, plus also the intelligence that is coming through.
Right.
So can you maybe just, dive into that a bit and explain that, for the audience here today?
Right. So the entry point to our entire system, the entire stack is the SDK. And we have designed the SDK to be built in such a way, it's not just a dumb client that is essentially getting some data from the server and just loading it. We have built in a lot of intelligence on the SDK. So, for example, we have lightweight models running on our SDK, which do a bit of federated learning on the client, so that in real time we can understand what the user is trying to do, and the SDK then take decisions by themselves without hitting our servers. On the other hand, we know that lightweight models probably are not good enough long term. So we ensure that whatever SDK is doing, whatever insights it is collecting, we send back to our servers efficiently and in an encrypted, safe way. And then we process it over long time periods. And then on our server, we run models which essentially recalibrate and give some feedback back to the SDK, which tells us, for example, what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong, and how to improve themselves. So our SDK is self-running in that way. And coming to the yield optimizer part, the yield optimizer is also designed in a similar way. So we have, yield optimization is a mathematical optimization problem. So there are multiple ways to solve it. There are simpler ways to solve it, but might not give you that much of a revenue uplift. And then there are more computation heavy, harder ways to solve it, which will, but then again, the caveat is it is computational heavy. So we ensure that we run multiple layers of field optimizer where we are doing something on the client, but then the actual one runs on the backend and then it sends some feedback back onto the client. So this model of having both a client-side intelligence and a heavy server-side intelligence, and they both talking to each other constantly and improving themselves, is what we adopted very well here. So I can give you a simple example. For example, we collect a lot of logs. So from a life cycle of an ad opportunity, we will collect data around how the user is behaving when it comes to a certain ad unit, a certain page. Are they bouncing out too often? Are they spending a lot of time on the page? And we crunch all the data and send it back to our servers. And then the insights are generated and then sent back again to the client. So our SDK, obviously, in order to boost our ad efficiency, does a lot of prefetching, caching, backfilling. And now this means more requests to all the mediation partners. And if we waste, let's say, a lot of those requests, then the mediation partner might deboost us as a publisher, right? So, and that might in turn obviously negatively affect revenues. So we ensure that the feedback loop that we have created understands when not to prefetch, when not to backfill, when not to essentially keep extra ads just in case on your device.
Right.
Because those are necessary, but not always necessary. You have to be I know it is always good to have an ad ready so it improves the render rate, but what if that ad never gets shown? Then you're just wasting a lot of ad requests, right?
Because that would be a terrible experience, right?
Yeah.
Waiting for an ad to arrive from a user perspective ultimately is like the worst karma that you can hope for as an app publisher.
Yes, that's true. And the other way around also, where you're saying that you hit your ad server 1 billion times, but only 10 million times you were able to show an ad to a user. Then the ad server thinks that most of your requests are not that great, and then it deboosts you, your eCPMs go down, everything just happens. So we send that feedback back. We understand that user, let's say, is on a page or a tab X on ad unit A, and then mostly there is a 70% chance they will move to, let's say, another tab Y, which has an ad unit B. So can I essentially prefetch for B when they are on A? And essentially, if I see that on average they are wasting the 90% of the request made on B, can I not prefetch B? So this flow then becomes dynamic for every user.
Right.
So you can say not only the relevance and contextuality of the ad, but the overall ad serving efficiency is also very personalized. And that's how we think of our ads in a box solution, because we are at the starting point, and then our servers sit at every touch point and every data collected that we have. And obviously all of this is in a very safe manner, in an encrypted way. It never leaves our servers. We obviously do not put that data on any third-party platform, etc. So yeah.
So, I mean, you spoke a bit about federated learning, about having a model on the client side, and that talking to our backend models as well, and then, overall improving, things from a publisher standpoint when it comes to prefetching, caching, rendering, etc., etc.
Right.
So I have the big so what question, right? Because, for a lot of people who are non-technical or even publishers who don't understand ads and ad tech.
Right.
So what is the impact of doing all this, right? So what does it mean or translate into as a benefit for them so that, why should they care? And this was something that Rajiv and I were also sort of discussing in the last episode. But, ultimately, they should care because, it impacts revenue or because it impacts user experience. Can you sort of, elaborate a bit on that? I think there were a few pieces in there, but I would love to hear specifically more about that.
So you're very right to say that essentially at the end of the day, there are two things. The publisher wants revenue and also does not want to harm user experience.
Right.
And revenue, at least in the world of ads, is just how many opportunities are there, how many are you able to fill, how many are you able to share, and how much are you getting paid per ad.
Right.
So it's a fill rate times sender rate times CPM. That's it. That's into ad opportunity, let's say.
Right.
So whatever we have built tries to optimize. So A times B times C times D, it tries to optimize every number in the product. For example, what I talked about earlier, that okay, we do prefetching, caching, backfilling very intelligently. That improves the render rate, because if an ad is ready, the chances of it getting rendered before the user drops out is high.
Yeah.
So it improves the render rate. But now if we have intelligence which says that most of the time that ad is wasted, so let's not call for that ad itself, right? So it improves again the fill times render, which is the overall efficiency of how you're doing things. And then the other thing is we have a yield optimizer that is learning, that is essentially adding bit pressure to your mediation servers, throwing dynamic flows, understanding when the user is interacting more, can we bid more, can we add more bit pressure. All of this is improving what your eCPM.
Right.
And ad opportunity is something that is user experience, right? So ad opportunity is obviously not our call. It is, for example, the publisher's product team calls that how many ads they want to show where. We obviously advise them to be subtle about it, to understand when is the right time to call it, when not, how much to refresh, how much to not. So that is where the A factor comes in. So this is how we essentially improving user experience means A goes down a little, but then we can optimize on B, C, and D very well so that your overall revenue still go up.
Right.
So the users are happy, they come back more, your churn rates are low, your retention rates are high, and your revenues are also good.
Right.
So that's how we do it.
Cool. We talked, maybe again, you've touched upon this a little bit, but we're not specifically using the lingo that maybe our audience might want to hear. So there's a lot being talked about artificial intelligence, right? And I know it's close to your heart, and that you keep bombarding us with new stuff that's happening in the AI space relevant to our industry, but specifically for publishers, right? I mean, so what are the artificial intelligence or AI related stuff and tech that we are building under the hood that makes things better, right, for them? And if you can, explain it in plain and simple English, it would, I think, resonate with them really well.
Right. So, okay. So I follow AI very closely. At least all the developments happening day in, day out, and things are changing at an insane pace. And I'm in general very bullish about how AI is going to transform the world into a net positive effect. So what essentially we have consciously done is, so there are twofold answers to this question. One is how AI is helping us internally improve as a company so that we can service our publishers better. Second, how are we empowering publishers using essentially the latest developments in AI, be it LLMs, being generative image, generative video, whatever, to essentially help them make their workflows easier, more efficient, help them make more money, etc. So from a publisher perspective, so all the platforms which are publisher facing that we have, all the SaaS platforms have AI workflows integrated in them. For example, in the ad manager, in the direct ad server that we have, if a publisher wants to run a campaign of their own, they don't even need a creative, they just need a theme and an idea. We will generate, essentially AI generate a headline for you, a body for you, image for you. Video is in the works, video is coming too. But yeah, maybe a video for you. And then what will happen is, essentially what we can even do is we can generate multiple variants and start a campaign and then see what's performing better and try to essentially boost that. So it's like a multivariate A/B model, but it's all out of the box for you. And essentially you don't even need like a creative team which goes out and builds creatives and then you have multiple copies and multiple iterations. All of this can be done in a few button clicks.
Right.
The second thing is that, so we are a very transparent platform. Our core platform where we essentially build relationship with our publisher has reporting anomaly dashboards. And all the reporting that we do, first of all, it's very detailed because that's how we do from the log. Since we are at the SDK side, we can log a lot of data points, you can do crunch a lot of insights, and we expose all of that to the publisher. So that is where they can essentially go in and check out the entire health of the system, see what's working, what's not, how are trends changing. And the best part is that they can actually converse with the reporting tool in natural language. So most of the reporting tool that you look at pre-AI era is just a bunch of dashboards or graphs and something. Not everyone might essentially be able to figure out insights. But now what we have done is that there is a graph, but then there is a natural language search bar where you can just say, okay, can you let me know that which country has essentially experienced the most drop in eCPMs in the last month. It will just tell you that. And then you can deep dive, okay, why this might have happened. So it essentially makes the work of their product and their tech teams and operation teams much, much simpler. So this is, and obviously now with all the AI revolution that is happening, I'm sure you must have heard about how DeepSeek has rattled the entire AI market. So now if inference is 97% cheaper, I'm thinking you can have an AI inference layer or decision layer on every step, right? Because up until now, people were thinking about, okay, what is the ROI here? I might be spending tens of thousands of dollars in different costs. Maybe the ROI is not that much. But if it's just $30 instead of $10,000, then obviously I
completely changes the landscape. Yeah.
So that is what, again, I keep on exploring those possibilities and ideas, and that is what we work on. The second thing is internally, what we have done is every member of the team has access to essentially the latest AI tools, the premium versions of the ChatGPT Pros and the Cloud Pros and the Gemini Advanced, etc. And what we have done is that so I think Sundar mentioned recently that 70% of code written at Google is AI generated. And I think I can claim the same for us. The hard part is the 30%, and that's where having AI to help you with the 70% gives you more time to think about the 30%, make more nuanced decisions, understand what should work and what should not, abstract out as much as you can. So that is how the workflow of the team is. And yeah, I mean, with all the changes, I'm just very bullish about how AI is going to change the SaaS world. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Ketan, we spent some time in the US together, and you were at a few events, where you got some first-hand experience with, the US market as well. I mean, while we've been building and talking to publishers globally, I think having the opportunity to immerse yourself and understand what are the core topics that publishers care about, or what are the things that they really care about, gives you like a good perspective into what their expectations are, right? So any learnings from that? And I know it's just been like a couple of trips, but then I'm sure there'll be more. But considering what you've seen in this part of the globe and what you're seeing over in the US, I mean, what's your take on, what is the next big thing that you think publishers will want from an expectation standpoint? I know there are other pieces that we haven't talked about, like CDP and more intelligence, etc. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. So a couple of things obviously jumped out when I was having these conversations in the US. So one is publishers. So obviously what has happened is recently there is a lot of supply in the world, and the demand is not matching the supply. Yeah. So it's always skewed. And so you can say that all these mediation and demand platforms are at power here. So what's happened is that from the publisher side of things, they obviously hook on to demand from X, Y, Z sources, but they're never getting any transparency. They're like, okay, there is some dashboard where you can just see how much revenue we made daily and nothing else. So that is one problem where they say that their inventory is being monetized properly or not. Is it essentially optimized or not? And there is no transparency around it. All they essentially get to know is, okay, this is revenue. If it's falling, why? They have no idea. If it's going up, again, they have no idea. So that's a problem where they don't understand what's happening with their ad inventory. One of the other things is then, again, a corollary to this, where a lot of platforms do IVTs, where essentially they say that, okay, 30% of your traffic was invalid, right? So, and then obviously if your 30% of your traffic is being marked as invalid, you're losing out on a lot of revenue. And then there is no solution also. You'll be, okay, I did not do anything. What is happening here? So, fraudulent traffic, how do you do intelligent traffic shaping? How do you ensure essentially publishers get a full picture of how their ad stack is? All of these are like the common problems I've heard from publishers. And at Adster, essentially, we have carefully, since we are a publisher first company, we have carefully curated a product feature set in such a way that we hit these spots. For example, it comes to transparency. Our platform, on our core platform, every configuration or every knob that you can spin in your ads world via SDK as a publisher is available to you as a configuration on a dashboard, where you can just go in, self-serve, don't even talk to us. You can change the knobs and see how it changes in real time. And then our reporting will also tell you what happened before and after that. So because we believe in full transparency and full control, because revenue is something which is very close and dear to anyone who is a publisher.
Absolutely.
So they would want to be in full control and use our intelligence, leverage our intelligence to essentially hyperscale their revenues.
Yeah.
So that is what we ensure. The second thing is, since we have designed the SDK, we have ensured that we use all the industry best practices across what Google, Meta, and the big demand side players of the world say. And we ensure that if you use our SDK, then how do we render an ad? How do we track clicks? How do we ensure postbacks are happening properly? All of that is very carefully built out. So the chances of an IVT, etc., keep going down. And even if they happen, since our anomaly pipelines run day in, day out, every hour, in near real time, it will tell you what has gone wrong so that your operations team can come in and see if there's a fix or not. So all of these problems are being catered to properly. So yeah, this is what I've observed, and then that is how we have worked in the last few months to improve our product offering so that it makes sense for the publishers everywhere.
Yeah, I think, you said it right? Trust and transparency are like in fact, the two Achilles heels of the ad tech industry, and mostly for publishers, because they are dealing with walled gardens and they don't know, how or why their revenue is impacted, but they still have to make do with whatever they're getting from the demand sources, the network providers and others. And that's why it's so much more important to help them figure out, and therefore, I guess what we are building is going to be definitely of value to them. Ketan, it's been great having you here on this podcast, and I know there will be more opportunities to quiz you about what more is coming down the line. But it was fantastic having you here and chatting with you, and thanks for being here.
Likewise, the pleasure is all mine, as I said. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.